Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy, and I'd like to thank you for joining the March 9th edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Give me just a moment. All right, so we'll start the evening with a review of our agenda. I'd like to tell you a bit about the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness before explaining a brief description of this program, Office Hours. Then we'll jump right into questions from our community. The topics that came up most frequently in our submitted questions in the past week have been, of course, the Limited Public Service Loan Forgiveness Waiver, as well as a couple of questions about teacher loan forgiveness. I'll also review some of our most frequently asked questions, and of course, I'll be checking the chat and Q&A periodically to see if we have any questions from those of you who have joined us for this evening's webinar. So let's jump right in. About the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. We were founded in July of 2021. We are helping students build financial life skills and empowering them to thrive. Our model is based on a vision for all college and career students in Maryland, and that's that they're able to achieve 6 pillars of collegiate financial wellness. The first one is creditworthy. The second one is ready. The third, resilient. The fourth, empowered. The fifth, successful. And the sixth, thriving. If you'd like to know more about these pillars, as well as the mission of the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, please do visit us online at mccfw.org. Again, that's mccfw.org. And about office hours. Office Hours is free, and it's a semi-monthly virtual student loan clinic that provides borrowers with, again, a free and trusted venue to help them navigate student loans and prepare for financial success beyond repayment. I'm the host of Office Hours, and I've personally advised students and their families on the repayment of more than $75 million in student loans. Even with the expertise, I must tell you, I have to deliver a disclaimer, and that's that Office Hours is for informational purposes only. Nothing that I share with you this evening should be construed as financial or legal advice, just solid, trustworthy information about student loans and hopefully directing you to resources that can help you make informed decisions as you are deciding what to do about your student loans. So let's jump right in. The first question, this is a very popular one. Are federal student loans going back into repayment on May 1st of 2022? And I must tell you that as far as I know, that is the date that's out there. So that's the date that is effective for now. The CARES Act forbearance, which has allowed many student loan borrowers to not have to make payments or have interest accruing since March of 2020, is currently set to expire on May 1st of 2022. But just earlier today, of course, I saw headlines, and I'm sure many of you have seen them as well. One says Biden officials signal that they might extend student loan payment freeze. And I just pulled one quote from an article on Politico by Michael Stratford, and it says, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain said last week that such an extension was under consideration by the Biden administration as it grapples with a broader question of whether to cancel large swaths of student debt. The administration has not said publicly how long an extension it may consider. So since this is in the press and not policy, I'm sticking with my answer, and that's that the CARES Act forbearance is set to expire on May 1st of 2022. There have been some things that have happened to signal that that might not be the date, but until those changes become policy, as of right now, May 1st, 2022 is the date that those payments are scheduled to resume. All right, let's move to the next question. I have less than 10 years of work experience and loan repayment history. Can the limited PSLF waiver help me? The answer is absolutely yes if you are employed in public service for a qualifying employer and if you had federal student loans that were in repayment during that time. One thing that I have seen among a few borrowers is this perception that the only people who will benefit from the waiver are the people who already have 120 months of both qualifying employment and loans with that were in repayment during that same 120 months. And it's true that those people will benefit. If they already have the 120 months of qualifying employment, as well as loans that were in a repayment status then that means that they technically have met the requirements for public service loan forgiveness. They would just need to apply in order to have that application granted. However, if you were a person who, let's say, has 5 years of work experience in public service, but you had the wrong types of loans, without the waiver, you could consolidate those wrong types of loans into a direct consolidation loan and begin to get on track for public service loan forgiveness, with the first payment on your consolidation loan being your first payment toward public service loan forgiveness. So under normal PSLF, you wouldn't benefit from the consolidation where past payments are concerned. But with this waiver, even if you had the wrong type of loans, if you consolidate those loans into a direct consolidation loan, then you could gain credit for the past months of repayment for those 5 years that previously meant nothing in terms of reaping a benefit of public service loan forgiveness. So this is not just about forgiving the debt of people who have met the 120 months of both public service employment and having loans in a repayment status. This is about getting people closer to the 120 months that are required to achieve public service loan forgiveness. So if you have less than 10 years of public service work experience, and let's say your loans went into repayment less than 10 years ago, that does not mean that you should ignore the waiver. It means that you're not one of those people who would get instant forgiveness if you applied. But applying through the waiver could get you closer to the 120 payments necessary to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So please do not write yourself off from this opportunity just because you have less than the 10 years or the 120 months of either qualifying employment or loans that were in a repayment status. The waiver is out there to get people closer to 120, and for people who already have the 120, then they could have their debt forgiven after their application is approved. All right, here's the question about teacher loan forgiveness. I have been a teacher for more than 10 years, and I received $5,000 from teacher loan forgiveness. Can I apply for PSLF? Does the waiver make a difference? So let's talk a little bit about teacher loan forgiveness. Teacher loan forgiveness is a program that allows for teachers who teach in certain schools to gain forgiveness after 5 years of service. There are a couple amounts. I think the maximum amount that you can receive from teacher loan forgiveness is $17,500. However, $5,000 is on the lower end of that. So with teacher loan forgiveness, after the 5 years of service, you can apply to have that $5,000 forgiven. Public service loan forgiveness is different. It's not just specific to teachers. It's about qualifying employment, and teaching in public schools is a form of qualifying employment. With public service loan forgiveness, you can apply to have the balance of your federal student loans, your direct student loans, forgiven tax-free after 120 months. In the past, here, I'm glad I got this slide here so I can show you the differences. In the past, under normal PSLF rules, the same years of service that are used for teacher loan forgiveness cannot be counted toward public service loan forgiveness. So if a teacher achieved that $5,000 of forgiveness through the teacher loan forgiveness program, and they wanted to pursue public service loan forgiveness for the remainder of their debt, then the clock would start back over. They would need to work and make payments for another 10 years or 120 months, and then apply to have the balance forgiven tax-free. So in that case, it would take a minimum of 15 years for the teacher to achieve forgiveness from both the teacher loan forgiveness program and the public service loan forgiveness program. So the example I have here is after 5 years of teaching in an eligible school, Sean received teacher loan forgiveness of $5,000. And we're going to say that this was in March of 2016. Under old PSLF rules, Sean would need an additional 120 months of qualifying employment to apply for the remainder of her debt to be forgiven under PSLF. So again, that's 5 years for teacher loan forgiveness, another 10 years for public service loan forgiveness, and after 15 years, then the rest of the debt could be forgiven. So we're looking at a minimum of 15 years, but things are different under the waiver. Under the waiver, the same years of service used for teacher loan forgiveness can count toward public service loan forgiveness. So if we revisit the example with Sean, Again, after 5 years of teaching in an eligible school, Sean received that teacher loan forgiveness of $5,000. Sean would now need approximately 5 more years or 60 months of qualifying employment to apply for the remainder of her debt to be forgiven tax-free through the limited PSLF waiver. So we've got 5 years for teacher loan forgiveness, another 5 years of continuing that qualifying employment equals 10 years altogether. So the waiver has effectively taken 5 years off of this process. Now that the same years of service that a person has used for teacher loan forgiveness can count toward public service loan forgiveness. So that is a big benefit there, definitely a stark difference. And I just wanted to share with you the language directly from the Office of Federal Student Aid published on their website. It says, if you received teacher loan forgiveness, the period of service that led to your eligibility will count toward PSLF if you certify the employment for PSLF for that period. The if there is, you have to certify your employment. After you achieve forgiveness through the teacher loan forgiveness program, you would still need to continue to certify your employment so that the Department of Education's designated servicer is able to continue counting the months of qualifying employment you have toward public service loan forgiveness. It's not an automatic process. So as long as you have certified that employment, then those same years of service that were applied to teacher loan forgiveness could be counted toward the 120 months that are necessary for borrowers to achieve public service loan forgiveness. So good news for the teachers. All right, next question again on public service loan forgiveness. My application got rejected, but I have more than 120 months of work for a qualifying employer and my loans were in repayment. Should I apply again? I would say yes. I would want to know why the application was rejected. Could it be that there was a clerical error? There may have been a box that you did not check, or perhaps one of the employment dates are missing. Either way, I would contact FedLoan, who is the current servicer for the Department of Education and for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. I would contact them and ask them what the reason was for the rejection, or refer to their letter to see if the specific reason is included. If it's not a clerical error and the application itself was just rejected because you, according to their account, you had less than 120, I would go back and ask for details on every one of those months. In some cases, it's possible that when you submitted your application, the applications were being evaluated based on the rules of old PSLF. Even though the waiver was implemented in October, an overhaul that large takes a lot of time to work its way through the servicer, because they have a lot of people that are providing customer service. And this was a major overhaul. So there was some lag there. I've heard from several people who have applied and received some letters that were saying that they would not qualify even though the waiver was in effect. The letters were based on older information. So by now, I think those issues have been sorted out, but definitely don't write yourself off. If there are months that you think their answer is incorrect, ask for more details, follow up, and just stick with it, because it can be a lengthy process. I know that sometimes it can be discouraging, but if you have the time, you definitely don't want to walk away from this opportunity. So please do apply again. All right, the next question is again about public service loan forgiveness. I am thinking about applying for public service loan forgiveness. My loans are all direct loans, but someone told me I should consolidate anyway. If they are all direct, why should I? All right, this is one of those questions where I definitely had to make a slide for that. We need to first talk about the concept of consolidation. So let's tackle the consolidation piece, and then we'll move on to the public service loan forgiveness piece. So basically, consolidation usually takes two or more existing loans and combines them into one new loan. In some special circumstances, including under the limited PSLF waiver, you can consolidate one loan. But consolidation is usually more than one loan that are already existing, and those loans are paid off. then a new loan is originated for the same size as all of the old loans. So in this example here, we have a picture of loan 1 for $30,000, loan 2 for $40,000. If these loans were consolidated, then the new consolidation loan would be for $70,000. Again, just the same size as the existing 2 loans that were consolidated into one new loan. And when you consolidate through the federal government, your loans become a direct consolidation loan. Some possible reasons that borrowers have for consolidation. One is easier record keeping. If you have multiple loans and you have more than one servicer, having more than one servicer means that you're going to have more than one payment to make each month. And for some people, they would just rather have one bill, one payment, one loan. It's definitely easier in terms of record keeping. And if you know that you're not good with that kind of stuff anyway, then perhaps having just one loan would be more advantageous for you. Another reason why some people consolidate is to gain eligibility for public service loan forgiveness. FFEL loans, Perkins loans, those non-direct loans are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness under the original rules. And even through the waiver, those loans have to be consolidated to gain access. So there are many people right now who are thinking about those old loans and saying, do I need to consolidate them? What should I do? The good thing is you can consolidate them online at studentaid.gov at any time for free. You can complete the application by yourself. If you want access to the limited waiver and you have FFEL loans, Perkins loans, those non-direct loans, then you would have to consolidate to take advantage of the waiver. Now, under normal circumstances, the decision to consolidate can be a bit more complex because usually once you consolidate older loans, the new loan has a repayment clock that is reset. It starts at 0. So none of your past payments, they don't matter in terms of counting towards public service loan forgiveness under the original rules. The waiver is a bit different. So again, under normal circumstances, that repayment clock is set back to 0 because a new loan has been originated. Your first payment will be number 1 on the repayment clock. And those past payments would not count toward PSLF. Before I move on to the next slide that is more about PSLF and the waiver, I just wanted to say that consolidation is not the same as refinancing. Consolidation is something that you can do through the federal government, again, online at studentaid.gov. Refinancing is usually what you're doing. You're searching for a better interest rate or better terms, and you would look to a private lender, a bank outside of the Department of Education. So if you refinance your loans, they will become a private consolidation loan. And as a private loan, that private loan does not carry the same benefits that are afforded to federal student loan borrowers. So we're talking about strictly the consolidation side here. This is staying within the Department of Education, their system as your lender. This is not refinancing with an outside bank. So with consolidation, we've got those 2 old loans. They're repackaged into one new loan. Now, when it comes to the repayment clock, I want to show you what can happen under the waiver. So we still have those 2 loans, but instead of looking at the value of those loans, I want to look at the number of months that a person has a repayment history on those loans. And this is actually pulled from an example from the Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid website. We have a borrower here who has one direct loan that has been in repayment for 50 months. They also have another direct loan that has been in repayment for 100 months. Under the language of the waiver, if these 2 loans are combined into a consolidation loan, then the consolidation loan could receive credit for the loan in the portfolio that has the longest repayment history. So we've got one loan at 50 months, one loan at 100 months, put those loans together and they are credited at 100 months. That is pretty significant. If we're thinking about this in terms of PSLF, it is possible for people to have to apply more than once because they have loans with differing amounts of repayment history. So if we look at direct loan number 1, that loan has 50 months of repayment history. And let's just assume that those, for all of those 50 months, the borrower was working in qualifying public service. That means that they'd have 50 months toward the 120 necessary to achieve public service loan forgiveness under the program's original rules. At the same time, perhaps they have this direct loan number 2 that's been in repayment for 100 months. That means that particular loan has 100 of the 120 months necessary to achieve public service loan forgiveness. So we've got 2 batches. There will be 2 applications for forgiveness at 2 different times, but for the same borrower. Under this waiver, if those 2 loans are combined, again, the whole consolidation loan could gain credit for the number of payments associated with the loan in the portfolio that has the longest repayment history. So the specific language from the Office of Federal Student Aid's website is, under the limited PSLF waiver, your consolidation loan will receive credit for time in repayment on your loans with different counts. Your consolidation loan will be credited with at least the largest number of payments on the loans that were consolidated. So again, you got one loan with 50 payments, another with 100. If you put those together, then that direct consolidation loan can be credited with 100 months. Now, this situation applies to direct loans. There are also answers on the Office of Federal Student Aid's website about other types of loans, but in this example, I have 2 direct loans that are consolidated into a new direct consolidation loan. And of course, that new loan is given credit for the number of payments on the loan in the portfolio that has the largest number of payments thus far. So those 50-month loans would be 50 months closer to forgiveness through this waiver. All right, so since public service loan forgiveness is undoubtedly the most popular topic that we have entertained since the start of office hours back in December 2021, I just wanted to go through a refresher with you about public service loan forgiveness under the old rules. And I'm going to pause here very quickly just to check my socials and see if we have any questions that are out there. I don't see any in the chat. All right. So we're good to go. All right, so under the original rules of public service loan forgiveness, there are 5 qualifications, and this image is pulled from the Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid. The first requirement is that you have to make 120 qualifying payments. The second requirement is that the payments have to be made on direct loans only. The third requirement is that the payments have to be made while the borrower is enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan. The fourth requirement is that all of this has to take place while the borrower is working for a qualifying employer. The fifth and final qualification is that the borrower still has to be employed for a qualifying public service employer at the time that they apply for public service loan forgiveness and at the time that they receive public service loan forgiveness. And as per the IRS, the forgiven amount is not treated as taxable income at the federal level. Remember, these are the 5 requirements of public service loan forgiveness under the original rules. The waiver is in effect right now, and in a few minutes, we'll see exactly how the waiver stacks up against the original rules of PSLF. All right, let's take a look at that first requirement in a little bit greater detail. Qualifying payments, you have to make a minimum of 120 monthly payments. So this is a process that's going to take you a minimum of 10 years to be ready to apply for the benefit. The payments have to have been made after October 1st of 2007. Those payments must be made on time and in full. As far as on time is, that means that all of them must be received within 15 days of the payment due date. And if you've made multiple partial payments throughout the month, then those payments would count as one payment. So there's no speeding up the clock by making extra payments. It's a minimum of 120 months. Fortunately, those payments do not need to be consecutive. So if you were working in public service and you made payments for 9 years, and then you decided that you wanted to take some time off and go travel and see the world, you would not lose credit for those 9 years worth of payments. What would happen is the clock would stop exactly where you left it until you resumed working for a qualifying employer and making payments with all the other requirements remaining intact. So you don't have to stay in the same job for 120 months. You don't have to even stay with the same organization for 120 months back to back. You just need to stay in the realm of public service, working for a qualifying employer if you want the months to count. Again, extra payments do not qualify. You can't make 4 payments in 1 month and expect that to count for 4 months. It's 1 payment per month. As a result of the CARES Act forbearance, many of us have not had to make payments on our student loans since March of 2020. And we've also had the benefit of interest not accruing. And I have thoroughly enjoyed both of those benefits. A good thing if you're on track for public service loan forgiveness, the months of the CARES Act forbearance, where we had 0 payments and 0 interest accruing, they should count toward the 100 necessary for public service loan forgiveness. So that's a nice benefit there. All right, requirement number 2, and again, these are under the old rules. Qualifying loans are direct loans only. I've listed here for you the different types of direct loans. There are direct subsidized loans, direct unsubsidized loans, direct plus loans for graduate and professional students, also direct parent plus loans, and direct consolidation loans. For a list of all loans that you can consolidate, you need to visit studentaid.gov. And again, if you find yourself in a situation where you need to consolidate to gain access to the limited PSLF waiver, then you can complete that application online at studentaid.gov. There's an asterisk next to the Parent Plus loan because Parent Plus loans those debts can be forgiven through public service loan forgiveness. However, there's only one repayment plan that parents are eligible for that makes it feasible for parents to have a balance left to forgive after that minimum 120 monthly payments. We'll talk about that payment plan on the next slide, but Parent Plus loans are treated differently than loans that a student has taken out for themselves. So let's move to that third requirement, qualifying repayment plans. The qualifying repayment plans include first the 10-year standard plan, and then all of the income-driven repayment plans, income-based repayment, income contingent repayment, pay-as-you-earn, revised pay-as-you-earn. All those are income-driven payments. Also, any other plan for which the monthly payment is greater than the 10-year standard plan. That's one that I don't see much. So really, the income-driven plans are the ones that we focus on because they're the ones that typically leave a borrower with a balance left to forgive after 120 months of qualifying work and payments. The 10-year standard plan is listed there as well. Of course, if a person went into repayment on this 10-year standard plan and remained in that plan for 10 years, they'd have nothing left to forgive. But payments under that plan are eligible because there's sometimes when people may be paying under an income-driven plan for several years, and then their income rises so much so that their payment under the income-based repayment plan is higher than their payment under the standard plan. And in that case, someone might say, you know what, I'd rather pay less, I'll go with the standard plan. And if they choose to do that, then the payments that they make under the standard plan would still count toward public service loan forgiveness. So that's why the standard plan is included there. Also, the asterisk is next to income contingent repayment because that right there is the only income-driven repayment plan that is available to parents who are repaying Parent Plus loans. Again, income-driven plans are the ones most likely to yield a balance for forgiveness. So for parents, the only income-driven plan that's allowable is the income contingent repayment plan. You can find out more about Parent Plus loans and how to get them on the track for public service loan forgiveness at studentaid.gov's Help Center. All right, so let's take a look at requirement number 4, qualifying employment. Where you work matters more than what you do. That is the primary takeaway here about employment. There are a lot of people who are concerned about public service loan forgiveness, especially because of their job titles. So they might think, well, I'm an accountant. That's one that I heard before. So public service loan forgiveness doesn't help me. That's not true. If you're an accountant that works for a qualifying public service employer, then you're eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Your employment makes you eligible for it. So don't focus on your job titles. Just focus on the type of organization that you work for. And here's a short list of the types of organizations that qualify for public service loan forgiveness. The first one is government. This is government all the way from federal down to state, local, and even tribal agencies are eligible employers for the purposes of public service loan forgiveness. Second is 501c3 tax exempt organizations. Third, other not-for-profit organizations that provide qualifying services. I want to say that if you work for a tax exempt organization, but it's not 501c3, you want to make sure that you go to the department's website, take a look at that PSLF application, and it will have a list on it of qualifying services that your employer must provide. I do want to say, don't write yourself off. If you work for a tax exempt organization that performs those services, but it's not 501c3, you may still want to apply so that your employer could gain that recognition as being eligible, an eligible employer for public service loan forgiveness. So don't write yourself off. Take a look at that language. And if your employer provides those services, then I say go for it, proceed. Because if you don't apply, then the answer is 100% certain to be no. Next, we've got full-time employment. The employment has to be full-time under the following definition: your employer's definition of full-time, or an average of 30 hours per week, whichever of those two is greater. For those of you that have part-time jobs, if you have part-time jobs that are for qualifying organizations, those roles can be combined if you're working them at the same time. Those roles can be combined to equal a full-time role. And I also want to highlight just a change that is favorable for members of the clergy. Hours spent in religious instruction, worship services, or proselytizing did not count toward public service loan forgiveness prior to July 1st of 2021. So if a person was a member of the clergy, they would need to look at the hours that they worked on average each week and then separate the hours that were spent in religious activities from the hours that were spent in public service activities. And only the hours spent in public service activities would technically count toward public service loan forgiveness. However, that restriction was eliminated on July 1st of 2021. So if you're a member of the clergy, please make sure that you take note of that change, and also get your paperwork in so that you can apply for public service loan forgiveness and hopefully even reap the greater benefit through the waiver. I just am looking at my Facebook feed. I see that there's a question. I'm going to pause right here just to answer that question. It says, when combining two loans, it does not matter which is the more expensive loan in terms of getting credit for months on repayment, correct? Yes, that's correct. Nowhere in the language that the Department of Education has published have I seen anything about the actual amounts of the loans. They're looking at the number of months that the loans were in a repayment status. So it's not about the amounts, it's just about the repayment history. So they're looking for the largest number of months in repayment history, and the entire consolidation loan is to be given credit for that larger number of payments. So not about the dollars, it's about the time. All right, and for the example, I want to read this because this is a really good question. It says, for example, if you combine a $10,000 100-month loan with a $50,000 50-month loan, you only have 20 months left to keep paying that $60,000 loan, correct? Yes. So one loan is 50 months, the other one is 100 months. The entire loan, once those two are consolidated, the entire loan is to be given credit for 100 months. So now, just like you said, you only have 20 months left, and that is huge. Thank you so much, Nicole, for chiming in and adding that is huge with the exclamation points, because that truly reflects my level of enthusiasm here around spreading the word about this waiver. It truly is a life-changing opportunity. And I have had the pleasure of interacting with several people who have had their applications approved and are experiencing just loan forgiveness, the same kind of loan forgiveness that you just typed. And I am amazed, and I'm happy for them because they stuck with it. May have been doubtful at first, but they did go ahead and apply. They gained the forgiveness, and now they are truly thinking about all the options that they had with that extra money that they were used to sending out each month on their student loan payments. So great question. Thank you so much for asking that. And again, I hope that other people are encouraged by that example and choose to apply through the waiver for PSLF and consolidate your loans if necessary. All right, so we're on the last requirement for public service loan forgiveness under the original rules, and that is qualifying employment and timing. Under the original rules, the borrower must still work in a public service career at the time that the PSLF application is submitted and at the time that loan forgiveness is received. So the way that the process would work is that after you have made it to your 120th month of making payments while working for a qualifying employer, then you submit the application. The application goes off to the Department of Education servicer for the PSLF program. They'll review the application. They will count your number of payments. They will count your months of qualifying employment. They will search to see if there are 120 of those months. And after they review the application, they'll let you know if the application has been approved. Under the original rules of PSLF, you are required to still be working in public service loan forgiveness, not in public service loan forgiveness, in public service for a qualifying employer at the time that the application was submitted and at the time that forgiveness is granted. And for people who had not heard about the program until they had already left a public service career or just switched employers, to a company that was not a qualifying employer, or even dropped from full-time to part-time. For them, even though they had the 120 months, they could not meet this requirement of remaining employed with that qualifying employer to full-time status at the time that they applied for and received forgiveness. So if you think about all of those requirements having to operate together at the same time, it's probably not surprising that in the first little bit more than 3 years of people being able to apply for public service loan forgiveness, 98% of the borrowers who had applied for it had had their applications rejected. The government came out with another program called Temporary Expanded Public Service Loan Forgiveness, which, as its name suggests, is a temporary expansion. It removed one of the requirements, and that was the requirement that you had to be paying under one of the eligible repayment plans. So they were going back and looking at people who had been rejected for the original PSLF and accepting payments that they had made, even if they were making those payments on one of the ineligible plans. Unfortunately, temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness had a similar rejection rate. But since the waiver went into effect in October of 2001, we are now at an estimated 70,000 borrowers approved for public service loan forgiveness. And that was as of toward the end of January. So I'm sure the number has gone up more since then. I am eager to hear how much that number has increased. But think about this. Prior to the waiver, the first wave of people could apply for public service loan forgiveness in late 2017. So between late 2017 and 2021, 16,000 people had been approved for this out of the more than 1 million who applied for it. But between October 2021 and January of 2022, roughly 3 months, another 54,000 people were approved. So that just goes to show you that the waiver is definitely making a difference. So if you work in public service, if you work in public service now and have federal student loans, or if you worked in public service before and you still have federal student loans, then please, I encourage you to apply through the waiver to see if you already have the 120 months, or if you don't, you can at least get closer to it. So let's talk about the waiver and what exactly makes it so different from the original version of public service loan forgiveness. So in that first column on the left, you'll see the 5 qualifications for public service loan forgiveness. The first is that you have to have made 120 monthly payments. The second is that those payments could have only been on direct loans. The third requirement is the payments have to be made on the direct loans, but while you were in certain types of qualifying repayment plans. The fourth requirement is that you had to have been working full-time for a qualifying employer. The fifth requirement, again, is that you still had to be working for a qualifying public service employer at the time that you applied for and received public service loan forgiveness. In the middle, we have temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. You still had to make 120 monthly payments, Those payments still had to be on direct loans. However, the requirement around the repayment plans was removed. You also still had to submit the application while you were working for a qualifying public service employer, and when you applied for and received public service loan forgiveness, you still had to be working in qualifying employment. Now, let's go to the waiver, and here's where the difference is much more pronounced. Under the waiver, instead of 120 monthly payments, you need 120 periods of repayment. So the Department of Education is not looking at your actual payments. They're looking back to see the months where your loans were in a repayment status. So if there was a month where you made a payment that was a little bit less than it should have been, or you made a payment late, or you didn't make a payment at all, as long as your loans were in a repayment status during that month, then that month could count toward the 120 months necessary to achieve public service loan forgiveness. So that's a big shift there, going from required payments to requiring a certain loan status, and that is being in repayment. The second requirement about direct loans, gone. Third one, in qualified repayment plans, gone. The fourth one is still there. You still had to have been working for a qualifying employer during those 120 periods of repayment. However, at the end, when you apply for PSLF and receive it, you do not have to remain working in public service at that time. Those are the rules of the waiver. So now that we see that the requirement around the type of loans, the type of repayment plan, and even the current employment at the time of applying, now we can see how that number jumped from 16 to 70,000. And I want to see it jump a lot higher. But this slide right here, I think, is the big takeaway, because it allows you to see the difference between original PSLF, temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, and then the limited waiver. Now, I must say the limited waiver, it's in its name, it's limited. It expires on October 31st of 2022. That is the date that has been put out there. I'm not sure that that would change from what I was hearing around the time that the waiver originated, was that this is a hard deadline, October 31st of 2022. So if I were applying, I would treat it as such for sure. Under these new rules, any prior payment made will count as a qualifying payment, regardless of loan type, repayment plan, or whether the payment was made in full or on time. The change will apply to student loan borrowers who have direct loans, those who have already consolidated into the direct loan program, and those who consolidate into the direct loan program by October 31st of 2022. The last line there is that Parent Plus loans alone are not eligible for the limited PSLF waiver. So if you're a borrower and the only types of student loans you have are Parent Plus loans, unfortunately, those Parent Plus loans are not eligible for any additional relief through the limited PSLF waiver. However, if you are a parent who has taken Parent Plus loans out for your child's education, and you have also taken out student loans for your own education, and you still have balances remaining on the loans for yourself and the loans you took out for your child, then consolidation could help. Because once Parent Plus loans are consolidated with student loans, according to the Department of Education, the repayment history of the Parent Plus loan would be ignored. So they would treat the consolidation loan in terms of coming up with that count to see how many you have toward 120. They would ignore the Parent Plus loan, and they would look at the history of the student loans that the parent has taken out for their own education. So there's a potential benefit there for Parent Plus loan borrowers, but only for those who have also borrowed loans for their own education. All right, so next slide is, what should I do next? That's the most popular question. Again, this is a time-sensitive opportunity that is set to expire on October 31st of 2022. So there are 3 steps. The first one is to know your loans. You can find out more about your loan portfolio by visiting studentaid.gov. You log in, you can see a history of all of your federal student loans, as well as any grants that you receive from the federal government. After you know your loans, that will tell you whether or not you need to consolidate. So the second step is decision point, consolidate or not. If you have FFEL or Perkins loans in your portfolio and you want for them to be considered for public service loan forgiveness, then you would need to consolidate them into the direct loan program. Keep in mind that under the old rules, if you consolidated those old loans, once you consolidate them, the repayment clock would start back at 0. Under the waiver, you can consolidate those old loans into the direct consolidation loan, and you could still be given credit for the past payments that you made on those older loans. So there's definitely a huge benefit to consolidating those older loans through this waiver if you want them to be considered for public service loan forgiveness. Under the old rules, no payments that you made on FFEL loans or Perkins loans would count toward public service loan forgiveness. Again, you want to apply online at studentaid.gov by October 31st of 2022. The third thing you need to do, and this applies to borrowers regardless of the types of loans you have, if you're interested in public service loan forgiveness, you must certify your employment. Certifying your employment is the only way that the Department of Education and its designated servicer will know that you intend to pursue public service loan forgiveness, and that will let them know that they need to start counting your months or your payments toward the 120 months, as well as your months of employment for a qualifying employer. You can use the PSLF help tool to begin populating the PSLF application online at studentaid.gov, or if you're more of a fan of paper, you can download the PSLF application from studentaid.gov as well. Again, please submit that form by October 31st of 2022. This is a time-sensitive opportunity, and if you want to get in on it, the deadline that has been put out there is October 31st of 2022. All right, I want to share a few additional resources, informational resources with you about the waiver. Federal student aid, of course, is the #1 source at studentaid.gov. There's where you can view your entire federal student loan portfolio. You can access the PSLF help tool to begin completing the PSLF application, and you can also complete the application to consolidate. So all of that can happen online at studentaid.gov. The second resource is the Institute of Student Loan Advisors at freestudentloanadvice.org. Their founder is the creator of a PSLF mega thread for all of the Reddit users. You can see updates from her. You can also see posts from borrowers who are actually going through the process of applying for PSLF. They have questions about a lot of subjects. They also give updates on their progress real time. So some people are going through it together, giving each other advice about, reaching out to the servicer and turnaround time on requests. You'll just find a lot of information straight from borrowers. And you can also, again, visit freestudentloanadvice.org for general student loan advice. Another resource I'd like to share with you is the Student Borrower Protection Center. They have put together a resource page for public service loan forgiveness. You can find it at protectborrowers.org. For those of you who get tired of reading all the language on these websites, you'll see that the Student Borrower Protection Center has several videos. They're brief, but they show you exactly what it looks like to take a look at your loan portfolio on studentaid.gov. Also to complete the PSLF application to certify your employment. And they also show you what it looks like to consolidate your loan. So if you're more visual, definitely check out the Student Borrower Protection Center's video library for PSLF and the limited waiver. All right, I have a couple of more questions submitted by borrowers. The first one is, will TEPSLF be around after the waiver? TEPSLF refers to temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. And I thought it would be good to revisit this slide so that everyone's clear on exactly what TEPSLF is. TEPSLF is temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, and it removes one qualification from the original rules of PSLF. That qualification is that your payments must have been made in qualifying repayment plans. The temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness program did not have an actual date on it for when it was scheduled to end. Instead, there was a dollar amount, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact dollar amount right now, but there was a dollar amount that was set aside for the TEPSLF program. And it was understood that the program would come to an end once that funding ran out. So with TEPSLF, It's not like the waiver in that you have to apply by October 31st of 2022 to be considered. It's an opportunity that will end once the money that has been allocated for the program has been exhausted. I think based on how much has been used so far, I'm pretty sure TEPSLF is going to be around after the waiver expires. If anything, I think that the limited waiver has probably extended the life of temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, because there are people who were applying for TEPSLF who now, through this waiver, could gain approval for public service loan forgiveness. And so, again, I don't have a hard deadline for when TEPSLF will come to an end. It's just based on the amount of funding that is available for the program and when that funding has been exhausted. All right. Another common question: how do I know if I qualify? Your employment history and your repayment status history must qualify. So those are the two things that you need. 120 months where two things took place. The first thing is that you were working for a qualifying employer in public service. And the second is that you had loans that were in a repayment status. If you have 120 months where both of those things were happening, then file your paperwork ASAP, because that 120 makes you eligible for public service loan forgiveness. You must certify your employment. If you do not certify your employment, the Department of Education will not know to evaluate your loans and your repayment history for public service loan forgiveness. So you must certify your employment. Once you do that, that will let the department and their designated servicer know that they need to evaluate your repayment history and your employment history to look for that 120 months of overlap. All right. I think this is the last question. What should I do next and when? The answer is it depends on the types of loans you have. For every borrower, regardless of your loan type, you need to certify your employment. You can do that at studentaid.gov. By completing the PSLF application, and you want to make sure that you complete one of those forms for every public service employer that you worked for during the period that your loans were in repayment. So anything after October 2007, if you had loans in repayment and you had, let's say, 4 qualifying employers, you need to complete one form for each of those employers to make sure that you're given credit for all of those months of qualifying employment. So certifying the employment is something every borrower has to do. As for people who have non-direct loans, you have an additional layer to decide if you want to consolidate. If you have FFDL loans and Perkins loans and you want to be considered for public service loan forgiveness through the waiver, then you have to consolidate. If all you have are direct loans, then you don't have to consolidate, but there could be situations where it could work to your advantage to consolidate anyway. Either way, if you're going to consolidate, you need to do so by October 31st of 2022 in order to be considered for public service loan forgiveness through the limited waiver. All right, at this time, I'm going to check back on my socials and see if I have any questions. I don't see any additional questions right now, so I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. I would like to show you all something that we are doing here in Maryland, and it's a campaign called MDTAPS. So I'm just going to see if I can pull this screen up for you quickly to show you what it looks like. All right. So this is the web page for MDTAPS. MDTAPS is a grassroots campaign across the state of Maryland to spread the word about the limited PSLF waiver. We want as many public servants in the state of Maryland as possible to become aware of this life-changing opportunity. So we've created a web page that just gives a summary of the program and also ask people to take the pledge to tell a public servant. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit so you can see a bit more about the page. We try to give a rundown of the major points of PSLF and the waiver, and to show how dramatic the increase has been from 16,000 people being approved in a period of under 4 years to 70,000 people being approved in a period of just 3 months. But there are a couple of things that we're looking for. In addition to making people aware of the steps necessary to pursue PSLF through the waiver, we want people to spread the word. So even if you're from another state, I encourage you, take the pledge to tell a public servant and just share this news of this PSLF limited waiver with all the public servants in your life. If you're not sure who they are, after you take the pledge, you'll be led to a page that answers several common questions like, who should I send this to? What should I say? We haven't even created a message template so that you wouldn't have to find the words on your own, because this can be a very complex subject. And sometimes, people don't want to talk about debt. So we put together the words for you. So if you'd like to, you can take the pledge to tell a public servant. The other thing you can do is that if you have had your loans forgiven through the limited PSLF waiver or regular PSLF, please share your success story. You don't have to, tell the world how much you had forgiven or even your name. It's just the testimonials that make this real for people. A lot of people listen to me talk about the waiver and they say, well, that sounds good in theory, but they just don't believe that it can work for them. And when I can come back to them and tell them a story of somebody who was rejected 2 or 3 times, but applied through the waiver and received forgiveness of $50,000, or in one case, $95,000, that speaks to them, because those are real stories of true experiences where people have benefited from this waiver. So if you're one of those people who have benefited, you can share your story with us. You can include as much or as little information as you'd like. If you submit a story, our team will reach out to you just to see what you're comfortable with sharing. And we will circulate those testimonials, those success stories out to the community in hopes that will encourage even more people to take advantage of this life-changing opportunity. Trust me, it is life-changing. So you can visit us online at mccfw.org/MDTAPS, that's MDTAPS, to either take the pledge to tell a public servant or share your PSLF success story. We also have some information there about the special circumstances, like consolidating for people who only have direct loans. Also a bit about parents and teachers who have pursued teacher loan forgiveness. The one thing that I have to say, of course, with all of this information is that the Department of Education is the primary source of information about this program. They are the lender. The limited PSLF waiver is their program. So the most thorough source of information that you can go to is the Department of Education. You can visit them online at studentaid.gov/PSLF for information about PSLF and the limited waiver. We have just tried to summarize the information that they have included on their page and direct people in Maryland to tell a public servant and to also take advantage of the program if they believe they're eligible. Also the disclaimer here, informational purposes only. We refer back to the Department of Education frequently because they are the #1 source and they are the lender. So if you want all the information, go straight to them. If you like a condensed version and you'd like to join the MDTAPS campaign, please visit us online at mccfw.org/MDTAPS. All right. So I'm going to scroll back up, get one more look at that hashtag MDTAPS, and I'm going to check in on socials just one more time and see if there's anybody on Facebook that has additional questions. And I see none for now, and we've got just about 1 minute left. So I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for those of you that joined me on Zoom and those of you that joined on Facebook Live. Office Hours is a free virtual student loan clinic presented twice monthly on Wednesdays from 7 to 8 p.m. and it's presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. If you'd like to know more about the center and our programs, you can visit us online at mccfw.org and also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The McFew. That's at THEMCCFW. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy. I'm the founder and director of the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. I thank you so much again for joining me for Office Hours, and I look forward to seeing you all again in 2 weeks at our next edition of Office Hours. In the meantime, take care.